together. Now, if you're wondering, who is this lady telling me all of this? My name is Hajia Goubi. I'm 22. I'm a former youth representative for the Netherlands to the United Nations. But above all, I'm very excited to be your moderator for today because we have a very exciting guest in our midst. And you have been preparing very sharp questions for said guests. Now, before we go over to our guest and we welcome him, I actually also want to start off by thanking Alexander Mouret and the Brave New World Conference for organizing this event here at Naturalis in Leiden, which is even more special considering that Leiden is this year's European City of Science. And now, when we speak about science, when we speak about all of that biodiversity, the evolution of human beings, I don't think that there is a better person to have in our midst than our very first Brave Young Minds guest. So I want to give a very warm welcome to none other than historian, philosopher, and best-selling author, Professor Yuval Noah Harari. Can we get a round of applause, guys? Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. Very nice to have you here, Professor Harari.
Great. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also a super exciting time because you have published many of the best-selling books around there. I mean, Sapiens, Homo Deus. But you have a new exciting book, and I actually want to start with that one before we get into the questions that the children have prepared for today. The book, it's called Unstoppable Us, How Humans Took Over the World. We can actually see the Dutch edition here in the back. But I wanted to start off by asking you, I've read up a bit about the book, and I've read that you have said that Unstoppable Us is the book that you have wanted to read when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Is that also the reason why you wrote it?
In a way, yes. It's kind of a present to my young self, but it's too late. I mean, I'm 46, so it's
still
not,
young at heart.
Yeah, but really the reason for writing it is because I noticed that, I don't know how it is here in the Netherlands, but in many parts of the world, certainly in my country, in Israel, young people, they are not taught in school the history of humanity, the history of the world. They are taught mainly the history of their country, their people, their religion, which is important, but it's not enough to understand who I am and what is this place and what is this life. You know, starting from things like football, which I like, and which was not invented in Israel or by Jews, it was invented by the English. It's part of who I am, but you need to know more than the history of Israel to know about football. And if you like chocolate, so it was discovered or prepared for the first time more than 4,000 years ago in Central America by the Olmecs and other people. And if you like your chocolate sweet, so you need sugar, and sugar comes from New Guinea. So you have to thank the Papuans for domesticating sugar for all of us. Yeah. Or maybe blame them, I don't know. But if you like it, you thank them. And if you go even deeper inside who we are, you want to understand love, or you want to understand fear, then it wasn't invented by any human group. It's much, much more ancient than humans. If you really want to understand why we are afraid of things and why we love our family or our parents or our friends, you need to go beyond humans to animals. This is the result of millions of years of evolution. Yeah. You need to understand that humans are animals. Right. So the book is a kind of introduction to who we really are deep down.
So it really touches upon this sense of identity, right? It's almost as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as though you're saying we should break it free from like these boxes that if we don't teach children where, you know, all these things that they like that are part of our identity, whether it's chocolate or football, as you say, where it comes from, then that is such a narrow view on, you know, our identity as humans.
Yeah, if you think, I mean, again, our group identity is very important, but it's not the whole story. If I just think, the only thing I need to know about myself is that I belong to this group of people, which is the best in the world, then I actually understand just one part of me. I'll never be able to understand who I really am. If the only thing I know is the story of my group and not the story of humanity, or the story of even beyond humanity, of what animals are.
Yeah. then that doesn't fit the entire broader perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, and maybe just quickly, you mentioned sweets. Who likes sweets? Can I see hands in the air? Okay, but who of the people in the room that like sweets knew that it came from New Guinea, is what you said?
Sugar cane.
Right.
Sugar
cane.
cane
Okay.
from New Guinea.
Who knew that? Okay, we have one very, very, very smart-minded person. And over there as well. Okay, cool. But indeed, okay, I don't know it either, and I like sweets a lot. But indeed, it shows the importance of going back into that story. Now, I think what underlines also all of that is curiosity. And I think we have very, very curious minds in here because you've all submitted questions. And I think we should just start off with the very first question that has been submitted by Nayara. Nayara, please go ahead and ask your question.
Do you think humans are able to live in harmony with nature?
Do you think humans are able to live in harmony with nature?
In principle, yes, they are able. We are not doing it. So it's not that it's absolutely impossible, but it's difficult, again, because of who we are. One of the reasons it doesn't work so well in the Dutch version, but that I named the English book Unstoppable Us, is because humans are really our species, our kind of animal. We are unstoppable in two senses. On the one hand, we are more powerful than any other animal. No animal can stop us. Not the lions, not the whales, not the elephants. We are much stronger than them. And the other thing is that we also have difficulty stopping ourselves. No matter what we achieve, no matter how much power we have, we always want more. Or we tend to want, nothing really satisfies us for long. And the combination of these two things, that we find it difficult to stop ourselves and nobody else can stop us, this causes us to usually not live in harmony with the other animals, because we want more and there is nobody there to stop us, so we just kind of run over them. But hopefully, if we are wise enough and also compassionate enough and care not just about ourselves, but also about the other animals and also about future generations, then we should have the ability to kind of restrain ourselves and find a way to live in greater harmony with the rest of nature.
Clear. Does that answer your question, Nayara? Okay, thank you so much for asking it. And it's a good question to start off with. And we actually have the following question. I think it sort of links to what you're saying right now. That question is by Sophie. Sophie, please do also go ahead.
What is the biggest challenge that mankind faces today?
On one level, again, it's to manage our own power. Because we are now the greatest danger to ourselves. And to dig even deeper into that, I think the biggest challenge is to find a way for global cooperation. Because if humans cooperate on any project, almost any project, we can do that. You think about climate change, you think about the ecological crisis. When economists tried to find out how much would it cost to actually solve the problem of climate change. If we think about humanity as a family, and we have a certain budget, we have a certain amount of money in the bank, we have a certain amount of resources, what percentage of our budget do we need to invest in order to solve the problem of climate change? Nobody knows for sure because, it's complicated models and mathematics and all that, but the number is in the vicinity of 2% or 3% of the budget.
Wow.
That's it.
It's very small.
It's, again, in absolute terms, it's a lot. It's
right.
Trillions of dollars. But in terms of the budget, it's actually a very small piece of the human budget.
Right.
So it's not, if they came and said it is 50%, then it's absolutely impossible. We are not going to do it. But it's even the highest estimates say it's less than 5% of the budget. So we can do that, but we are not doing it. Instead, we are investing our resources in other things. Putin decides to invade Ukraine, and then people invest the money that should go to fight climate change is now going to build tanks, is now going to build missiles. So that's our biggest problem, finding a way to cooperate amongst ourselves. And again, it's not impossible. It's kind of, there is a balance there. On the one hand, we should never underestimate human stupidity. It's one of the most powerful forces in history. Humans often make terrible mistakes. We do it in our private life as individuals, we do it in our collective life as well. But at the same time, we shouldn't lose hope in human wisdom and compassion. Because when we do manage to work together on something, then we are also unstoppable in that.
Right. Wow, that's powerful. And as well, the 2%, to me, it's really striking because it's, I don't know if you know, I mean, I'm assuming you know everything because you're Professor Harari.
I don't.
I can imagine, but do you happen to know, like, for example, we are still in the corona crisis. Do you know what percentage of the global budget that was?
More than that.
More than 2%, wow.
Yeah. More than two. Again, the 2% number is not. It's not a one-time investment. We need over many years to invest every year above what we invest right now. To invest an additional 2% of the budget in developing new eco-friendly technology, in building the right infrastructure. If we do that, starting now, we should be okay.
Okay, wow.
But we are not doing it.
Right,
Again,
we are not. And actually, there is a question about that, and thank you for shedding light on that, because it's just, I think, realizing that we have spent this money before in other situations, and if we would have, if we would be doing it now, then, we could be making that change.
I think that the key thing is not to fall victim to hopelessness, because some people, you see that, it's too late.
Right.
We are heading towards catastrophe. We are heading towards, doomsday. There is nothing we can do. That's very, very dangerous to fall into this way of thinking, because then you lose hope and you stop trying.
Right. It paralyzes you.
Yeah.
Well, actually, tapping into hopefulness, Emily, she's in the room here. She's also submitted a question for you, Professor Harari.
Will humans be the cause of their own extinction?
It's a good question.
I can't predict the future. I mean, we might be the cause of our own extinction, but it doesn't have to be like that. Actually, since, I would say, 1945 and the creation of nuclear weapons, we came into this situation when we might be the cause of our own extinction. Previously, in history, it was not possible. The most, biggest conquerors in the world, Genghis Khan and all these people, they couldn't destroy humanity. But since 1945, we have the means to destroy ourselves, and almost every decade we acquire a new means of destroying ourselves. Now we have a menu. How do we want to destroy ourselves? Like this, like this, like this? We now have a menu. It doesn't mean we have to pick something from the menu. We can just close it and no, we don't want that. Again, I can't estimate the chances because of what I said earlier, that we should never underestimate human stupidity. That you say, it would be crazy to do this thing, and so many people understand it would be crazy to do this thing. You sometimes need just a few people to nevertheless make this decision, like with war. To make peace, you need everybody to agree to make peace. To make war, you just need one side. One side is enough to start a war. It's like that with many of the other dangers we face. Like we are developing some very powerful and frightening technologies, like bioengineering, like the ability to genetically engineer human babies, genetically engineer ourselves. This is an extremely dangerous technology. Now, 95% of the people in the world, of the countries in the world, can agree this is dangerous, let's not do it. But if even 5%, 1%, one country, nevertheless decides to do it, it opens the gates of hell.
Right.
So there is an imbalance there. And the most important thing to say about all these questions to predict the future is to understand that it's impossible to predict the future because it's not written anywhere. It's not deterministic. The decisions that all of us make in the next few years, this is what will shape the future. So, part of the job of people like me who talk about the future, it's not kind of trying to predict the future, and then if what I said came true, I'm very happy. Yeah, I managed to predict it. What's the point? If you can't change the future, there is no point talking about it. The whole point of talking about these big dangers we face is because we can still change the way we behave, and then this danger will not come true.
Right. So it's more to prevent catastrophe.
Like you talk about dangerous scenarios, not in order to be very happy when
Right.
they
When you're right, when you're
materialize.
proven right,
"Hey,
yeah.
I was right,
Yeah.
but to prevent them from happening. And then people will say, you were wrong.
Yeah.
But that's the good position to be in.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Emily, also for your question. Professor Harari, if I may ask one thing. The title of your book, it's also Unstoppable Us. And on the one hand, if I hear you correctly, it can be a blessing because we are unstoppable. And if we cooperate, we can do so much. It can
Yeah.
also be a curse.
Absolutely.
Because we are unstoppable, perhaps in our greed and many other things. I've heard you mention more than once now compassion and kindness towards each other as fellow human beings. Are you optimistic that we can drive compassion far enough to make sure that being unstoppable is a blessing rather than a curse?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Again, we have both of these possibilities within us.
Right.
And the key thing, it's choice. It's a decision we make. So it's the whole question, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Is this more likely? Is that more likely? This is not so important. Because, if I say I'm optimistic, then people feel, okay, we don't need to do anything. It will be okay somehow.
Right.
And if I say I'm pessimistic, then people feel, well, it's hopeless. There is no point of doing anything.
Yeah.
And both are wrong. I mean, the key thing is it's our responsibility
Yeah.
to make the right decisions and then things, and we have every option of making the right decisions. It's not too late. It's not written anywhere what's going to happen.
Yeah, so that the stand should be rooted in action, that every day we decide to be compassionate and we decide to be kind and choose that for the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Nicolas also have a question for Professor Harari. It's a really interesting question. Nicolas, 12 years old, he wants to know, why are adults so reluctant to act on obvious world-scale problems that are so apparent to children and teenagers? The climate crisis, for example, you see that most of the people taking to the streets are younger people, while those in power are the not so young ones, the older ones.
Yes. Why they are so reluctant? I mean, first of all, it should be said honestly, not all of them are reluctant.
Right.
There are
Fair enough.
also, I think that kind of framing the problem as the young against the old is dangerous. I mean, politics is all about making alliances.
Right.
Again, it's about cooperation. You need a lot of groups to cooperate on to realize any big project. So it's important to be careful not to frame the problem in advance in a way of us versus them. Hopefully, we can all collaborate on that. Having said that, part of the issue is that, many of the people who run the world, the presidents, the CEOs, and so forth, they are in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s. So when you talk to them about the world in 2050 or the world in 2080, to them it's kind of, I won't be there. I mean,
Right, I was going to say.
they don't feel it in their in a visceral way in their gut.
Right.
As it's some kind of, I have the next election to worry about. 2050, I won't be there.
Yeah.
And for young people, they are thinking about their life, their future, and 2050, it's tomorrow, it's their life.
Yeah.
So it feels much, much more urgent to act on that. And also, one of the things that happen to people as they grow older is that you kind of get stuck or
Rusted,
set
yeah.
in a particular way of being, in how you think, how you do things, and it becomes difficult to change. And we will need to make some very big changes in order to solve big problems like climate change. So it's more difficult for the adults to change their lives because they're used to their lives.
Right.
When you're 12, you're not so used to your life because you're new.
Yeah.
You just came here.
Yeah.
So, and anyway, being a teenager is all about change. Even if you don't like change, nobody is asking you.
Yeah.
Your body is changing in a dramatic way. Like, of course, also when you get older, your body continues to change, but at a slower pace.
Right.
Like you're 12, you're 14, you're 16, it's a dramatic change. So you're forced to kind of invent yourself or reinvent yourself continuously. By the time you get to be 40, you're tired of change. You don't want things to change so much. You want to, let's take it easy. Let's take it slowly.
Slow down now. Okay, yeah. But that agility then that comes with the ever-changing like phase of life that is youth, that is a part of it, you'd say.
Yeah, I mean, for a young person, it's easier to imagine a completely different world, a completely different way of being.
Yeah.
Because this is anyway what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And for somebody who is 40 or 60, it's much more difficult to imagine living a different life.
Right. I have a next question, and I think it fits perfectly into this thing you say about imagining the not-so-standard thinking outside of the box. Because when I saw this question, I don't think it's a go-to question that I have asked, at least in interviews. So Jacob, please go ahead.
Why do humans cry?
Why do humans cry?
It's a good question. Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, you mean the actual tears or the
sound and the tears?
The sound and the tears.
I asked this question because my little sister, cries a lot. So it was quite easy coming up with it.
Oh, nice. That's at the top of your mind daily then.
Well, when I was a young boy, I also cried a lot. My two big sisters are here, so they can kind of testify that, I don't know, when I was 7 or 8, I used to cry a lot also. I really don't know. I mean, I think the thing about science, the beautiful thing about science, is that if you don't know something, even as a big professor, it's perfectly fine to admit you don't know. And then you go and do the research. And the research is not just Google it, it's actually do the research.
Right.
And my guess is that we are not the first animal that cries. That if we do the research, we find that at least some of the mechanisms, some of the patterns of crying, including the sound, including the tears, we have in common with other animals, other apes, other animals. And what are the kind of deep reasons that we have this? So, one option is at least the sound of crying is to alert others to our distress. Humans are social animals, and especially when you're little, then you depend on the grown-ups, certainly on your parents. So if you're a little boy or a little girl and something bad happened to you, so you want your parents to know, and so you cry. so they come. If they don't cry, they don't know.
Right.
I would imagine this is just a hypothesis. I'm not sure if it's true, that solitary animals that don't live in groups, they probably don't cry.
Okay.
I mean, because what's the point?
Because there's no social function.
I mean, if I live alone if I'm this kind of animal that I live alone in the forest, and I don't know, I stepped on a
rock, a very
sharp rock, and I hurt my foot, and I cry, what's the point? Nobody would come to help me. Some tiger would come and eat me. So maybe they like very stiff.
Right. So maybe, Jacob, your sister just, maybe next time when she's crying, you should give her like a really big hug so she knows she'll be okay. But maybe I can ask you, why do you think that humans cry?
To draw attention.
Okay, fair enough. You guys are in alignment on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, to draw attention is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, sometimes we do it on purpose to draw attention. Sometimes we really need the attention.
Yeah, that's a good point. And thank you, Jacob. I really liked that question when I read it first, so thanks for that. Katja has another question that she wants to ask.
Why were the men's and women's rights historically not equal?
Right, so why were men and women's rights not equal historically?
Well, we know that in most societies, at least big societies, kingdoms and empires and big societies, there was a huge gap in rights between men and women. In many societies, girls and women, they couldn't go to school, they couldn't go to university, they couldn't be doctors or teachers, or certainly not presidents and political leaders. In many societies, women were simply considered the property of men. Like a man has a horse and he also has a woman. And this is one of the biggest questions in history. Why was it like this in so many societies? And again, the answer is we don't know for sure. This is something that I actually did read a lot about. And still, at least personally, I can say I didn't read a very good answer. Many people think that, well, this is obvious. It's because men are physically stronger. But apart from the fact that this is not always true, it's only on average, many women are physically stronger than many men. What is more important is that in human societies, social power doesn't depend on physical strength. If you look at the most powerful people today in the world, whether it's in politics, like the President of the United States or China, if you look in business, like the CEOs, the chairpersons, the managers of the big companies, you look at in religion, like, I don't know, the Pope, they are not the strongest people around. You don't get to be president of the US or Pope of the Catholic Church by having this boxing match. And, you know, the Pope Francis, he managed to knock out all the competition and he became Pope. It didn't happen like that at all. To really reach to the top, in most places, you need social skills. You know, even in criminal gangs, the big boss is usually somebody in his 50s, 60s, who rarely actually gets into a fight. He gets much younger and stronger men, usually men in their 20s, to do the fight for him. So it's social skills. And there is no reason to think, there is no evidence that men have better social skills than women. Actually, many people think it's the other way around, that women actually have better social skills. So why men reach to the top? We don't have a good theory yet. We keep researching it. It's one of the biggest riddles of human history, I would say.
That we have. Yeah. Katja, maybe I can ask you the same question. Do you know why? Or do you think it's
Do you have a theory?
Yeah.
Well, I never actually thought about it. I mean, it could be because, yeah, it's physical strength. You also always see that most presidents and CEOs are men, and most scientists are also men.
Right.
So it could be that, I don't know, some personality traits that are very, helpful have men, or they just do it better, something like that.
Or they pick their male friends to enter in. They're like, only you can.
Yeah, but again, I mean, even if you think about like a personality trait like competitiveness, people say, oh, men are much more competitive. So they kind of struggle to reach the top. Well, the women are less interested in that. I'm not sure if it's true. Some people say it. But even if it is true, then it should have been the other way around. Because again, the real power of human beings is cooperation. And somebody who is very competitive and thinks only about himself, and I want to reach the top, and everybody else I should be left behind, this kind of person, he's not good in cooperation. So again, whether it's science or whether it's politics, in the end, it's always about cooperation. You don't win the Nobel Prize in chemistry or medicine or anything by doing everything by yourself. It's impossible. You need to cooperate with other people. And you don't become prime minister, again, just by kind of beating everybody. You need to build a coalition of supporters. Right. You need a lot of friends. So just being competitive, that's not enough. Actually, the qualities that are, again, I'm not sure if it's true, but they are often associated with girls, with women, you know, the ability to compromise, the ability to see things from the perspective of somebody else. Instead of being so focused on me, thinking, wait a minute, what does this person, how does they see the situation?
Right.
This is actually the key to having good social skills. So it's really a big mystery what's happening.
It is. Now I'm actually even more curious. So thank you so much for that question.
I think there is a suggestion there of what could be the answer.
Of Jacob.
Well, maybe it's because social status is often inherited. So maybe it was in older societies where physical power actually meant dominance, that eventually just the sons of the sons of the sons just became king, and then it became tradition.
That's a good.
Oh, wow.
That's a good option. Yeah.
That is a very good option, Jacob.
So actually,
Professor-
maybe it's something in the situation not today,
Yeah.
but in the situation 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago,
Yeah.
then we got stuck with it.
Yeah. It's
yeah.
a remnant of it.
That could be, even though again we saw so many revolutions
Yeah.
in history. So what gave this a staying power? And again, you think about something like the Catholic Church. I mean, it can't be just inheritance because the Pope, maybe some of them have children, but they're not supposed to have children.
Right.
So it's not like that they pass it to their kids.
Eventually, it probably just became tradition.
Tradition,
So
yeah.
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 Well, that's the best theory we've heard
I
so
was
far.
going to say, if we have anything, we have Jacob's theory, so thank you.
We need to do more research on
Yeah.
that, but that's a very good hypothesis to start a research.
True. Professor Harari, you might want to team up with Jacob for that one if you go into research. Just a suggestion here. Cool. Hey, we have another question as well from Victor.
How do you think the war in Ukraine will continue on from this point?
How do I think the war will continue? I hope it will end as soon as possible.
Right.
Ultimately, again, it's a decision of one person. If Putin decides to end the war, that's it, the war is over. It's actually a very rare case in history that the war really came out of the decision of just one person. It's not it's not like there was this big hatred between two nations, but it was really the decision of one person which inflicted so much suffering and death and misery on millions and millions and millions of people. Again, I can't predict how it will develop. But I can say that it's our responsibility of everybody, in whichever way we can, to support the Ukrainians, to help the Ukrainians defend themselves. They didn't want the war. It's not their fault that there is a war. They're in a very difficult situation, both the people who are in Ukraine and millions of refugees who had to flee Ukraine. And it's our responsibility to help them in any little way that we can. It's important also because it's about saving the peace of the entire world. Because even though there have been wars in recent decades, most of them were internal wars, civil wars, and it became a kind of rule of the international system that even strong countries, they can't just invade a smaller and weaker country and conquer it because they want to. You just don't do that anymore. That was the most basic rule of the international system. And it was a very good rule because, for instance, it meant that countries could invest, we talked about budgets earlier.
Right,
Countries could invest a lot less money in their army, in their military. In the last decades, countries have invested a smaller percentage in their armies than in any previous time in history because they knew that it's no longer acceptable for a big country to just invade us and conquer us. And so they could invest more money in education, building schools, in healthcare. Now, when Putin kind of broke the most fundamental law of the international system, if he's allowed to get away with it, then again, the law is broken. And what we will see, what we already see, is that countries all over the world, they become afraid. Hey, if it's now possible to do this again, we have to invest more in our armies. We have to have more tanks, more airplanes, more missiles. So they take money, and we see it already happening. They take money from schools, they take money from hospitals, they take money from building bridges and shift it to building tanks.
Wow.
If on the other hand, it's like a bully that breaks a law. If nobody does anything, if the bully gets away with it, then you'll see a lot more bullies around. But if the bully doesn't get away with it, if he fails, if he's punished, then actually the rule is strengthened. People look what's happening, they see, oh, he tried, he didn't get away with it, okay, the rule stands. So it's not just out of compassion and empathy for the Ukrainians. It's actually from our own self-interest, no matter where, in which country we live, to help the Ukrainians in any way that we can.
Right. If we can't do it out of compassion, which we should, but if we can't, then it's even within our own self-interest.
Compassion and self-interest, they often go together. Why not?
Right. Yeah. that's a good point. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Victor? Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. Hey, and Professor Harari, I also hear you using almost a metaphor of a bully, right? To explain it, and it makes it more tangible as well, I think, in the heads of many, at least in my head. The next question, I think it taps into that a little bit. The question was submitted by Elliot. So I'm checking. Elliot, there you are. Go ahead.
What's a good story?
What's a good story?
Right. So what are the ingredients for a good story?
Well, there are two meanings of the word good. There is the sense of what kind of story will convince a lot of people. The problem here is that many of the most convincing people are also harmful. Because very often, again, the easiest way to grab our attention and to convince us is to play on our deepest emotions.
Right.
Like fear, like anger. So it's relatively easy to spread a story, to convince a lot of people to believe in a story, if you say frightening them about something. Again, like in the political field, like you say you have all these foreigners who are coming to destroy you, to hurt you. This is a very convincing and powerful story because it plays on the deep fears that humans have. So it's a good story in the sense that it's convincing, but it's very harmful. Again, at the root of many of the wars and conflicts in the world, you find stories like that. Humans, they rarely fight wars over territory or over food. We think we fight wars over territory like chimpanzees, like wolves, but we don't. It sometimes happens, but usually we actually fight over stories.
Right.
That we have enough land to build houses and to feed ourselves, but there is a story that people tell us about whether it's a fantasy about some magical place that we must have, or it's a frightening story about foreigners are coming to harm us. And most of the wars are actually about these stories. They are not about that you really don't have enough land and you must go and conquer somebody else's land. So really good stories are not just the ones that convince people, it's the ones that actually help people, that actually make the world better. So my test of a good story is what is the impact of this story on suffering? Like the most basic level of reality, of what is there in the world, I would say that it's always, no matter what you're dealing with, what you're engaged with, it's always good to ask, who is suffering? Like if I'm telling a story, if I'm convincing a lot of people to believe in some story, does it cause anybody to suffer? And if it's the case, then at least we need to listen to these people.
Right.
Tell us how our story is harming you. And how does it look from your perspective? And if it does cause some people to suffer, the good thing about stories is that we can always change them.
Right.
We can't change the laws of physics or the laws of biology. Even if they cause a lot of suffering, what can we do? We didn't invent the laws of biology. Like there are viruses, there are pandemics, lots of people suffer. We didn't invent these laws, what can we do? But with a story, if this story, like the question earlier about the status of men and women.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons for the huge gap is for thousands of years, people told the story and believed the story that men are better than women, that boys are better than girls, and girls shouldn't go to university, and they can't be priests, and they can't be presidents because they are less intelligent, they are not brave, they cry all the time. How can we rely on them?
Yeah.
It was just a story. And it caused immense suffering to billions of people. And the good thing is that if it's just a story, we can change it very quickly. It sometimes takes just a few years to change a story that people believed for thousands and thousands of years. And today, again, when women in much of the world, they can be presidents, they can be scientists, they can be judges or journalists, and we look back not 1,000 years, but 100 years when this was not possible. And we say, how didn't people realize what the truth is?
Yeah.
So looking back, it's very easy to see how everybody was just kind of entrapped within a story. But when you're in it, it's very difficult to see that this is just a story somebody invented 2,000 years ago. Why do you believe it? People feel that it's the reality, it's the truth.
And how do we make space for that? Because indeed, you touched upon the point of fear, right? And almost maybe the fear for scarcity, fear of the unknown. As you said, it's one of the deepest, I think also oldest emotions of mankind. How do we push away the fear in people and make space for them to understand the suffering they may inflict on others through them believing that rhetoric?
One thing which is very important is also to listen to them. The people who are frightened, very often, they themselves, there is something that really frightens them, or they feel in some kind of stress or problem. And so it's also important to listen to them.
Right.
Otherwise, they feel that you're dismissing them. So we need to be open also to that. And I think one of the most basic skills, because humans are such good storytellers, and we rule the world really because of our ability to tell these stories and to convince millions to work together. One of the most crucial skills for a human being is to be able to tell the difference between reality and fiction, which is much, much more difficult than sounds at first. Because, again, we kind of live inside the dreams of dead people, inside the stories that were invented hundreds, sometimes thousands of years ago. And it's so difficult to see that this is not reality. This is just, take, for example, something like money.
Right.
Like we are surrounded by money, and it's so important and to understand, money is just a story somebody invented.
Somewhere in the past.
Very important. Like maybe the most powerful story ever invented is not about some god, is not about some zombies or vampires. It's about money. Just, and it's actually harder for adults. Like you lived your entire life running after money and wanting to have lots of money in the bank and paying for everything with money, and to stop and think, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And to realize it's nothing, it's just our imagination.
Right.
Something like a fruit, like an apple and a banana, you can actually eat it. It's not a story in my mind, a banana, it's a real thing. But when I go to the market and I give somebody €1 and I get back a banana, what is this euro?
Right.
This is just a story somebody invented. It has no objective value.
Right.
You can't take a euro and eat it.
You could, but you shouldn't.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, actually, most euros today are not even paper money or coin.
It's digital even.
It's digital.
Yeah.
So it's just digital code.
Yeah.
Like I work for the whole month, and at the end of the month, what do I get? That somebody shifts some digital code from this file in the computer to that file in the computer.
Yeah.
And I'm still willing to work for it. Why? Because for some strange reason, everybody else is accepting it.
Right.
Like if I now want to buy a banana from you, I just transfer to you some of this digital code, and you give me the banana.
I will take it. Yeah.
So what's happening here?
Yeah.
It's kind of this huge story that everybody believes. I believe it because you believe it.
Yeah.
You believe it because everybody believes it. But the thing is that we can change it. Like people ask, how is it that some people, they have, $100 billion and other people have nothing? This is not because of the laws of nature.
Yeah.
This is because this is the way we tell the story. If we don't like it, we can just change the story.
Right. But that's a good point, right? Because it's about being intentional about it, that even if we still accept it, at least we remain critical, because we acknowledge that indeed, unless we realize that it is indeed a fictional story from the past, we will see it as reality. And indeed, if you see it as reality, you're not remaining critical, you're not reanalyzing about it.
Yeah, you say, well, this is just the way the world is. What do you want us to do?
True. Hey, and we have time for one final question, which is the last question that was submitted by Jasper. So Jasper, please go ahead.
Does technology make us happier?
It's a good question.
Does technology make us happier? It can, but not necessarily. Again, it depends on us, what we choose to do with the technology. Like, for instance, I met my husband online on the internet like 20 years ago, and it made me very happy. So I'm happy that you have these engineers who created this technology that enabled me to meet him. But other kinds of technology can be extremely harmful. From nuclear bombs
Yeah.
to, again, the dangerous use of genetic engineering. Or, if people now try to create, there is a war, and so they say, okay, we have now this AI, artificial intelligence, let's create robots that can fight for us. And people are working on that, on creating killer robots, autonomous weapon systems. This is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
So the technology itself doesn't tell us what to do with it. Even a much simpler technology, you think about a knife. You can use a knife to murder somebody. You can use a knife to save their life in surgery. Surgeons also, they use knives.
Yeah.
And you can use a knife to cut salad for dinner.
Right.
It's a knife. I mean, the knife doesn't tell us what to do with it. We decide what to do with it.
Right.
So usually the fault is not, technology by itself is not bad.
Right.
It's what people choose to do with it. There is one difference, and maybe we'll end with that. Now we are creating the first technology in history which can make decisions by itself,
Right.
and this is extremely dangerous. That's the really big thing about AI. Oh, everybody's talking about AI. It's because of that. Because, even an atom bomb, it can't decide where to blow up. You always must have humans telling the atom bomb, you blow up there. But artificial intelligence is the first technology in history. It can make decisions by itself.
Right.
And
that
this
changes
is a game changer. And this is very dangerous because it means we might be losing control of our future.
Right.
So we have to think very, very carefully about this specific technology.
Right. So AI, indeed, that is where almost the autonomy of the humans are not at play anymore.
Yeah, it raises it's the
Right.
first technology which really questions
Yeah.
our freedom
Yeah.
to make the decisions by ourselves.
Yeah, but then in essence, you say technology in itself, it makes no demands. If we want to ill-use it, we will ill-use it. But if we want to use it for the furtherance of our kind, then we can do that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question. Thank you. I think it's a good one to end on. Now, guys, thank you so much for submitting all your questions, for being sharp, for listening, for answering back. I think we have a very good hypothesis at the end of the session, thanks to you, Jacob. So that's good to see. And of course, a very, very, very big thank you to you, Professor Harari, for being willing to be here, sharing all these insights, answering